Hi, Roxy Keller here again, continuing to bake my way through the Great British Baking Show challenges. And it's the last challenge of Caramel Week from 2017, and it's the Showstopper challenge. So the challenge is to make a caramel cake, and they have to make caramel or spun sugar in 3 different ways. Now, caramel cake doesn't mean that the sponge itself has to be caramel flavored. It can be any flavor, but then you have to have these different types of caramel in different ways on your cake. So I am making a lemon sponge and a raspberry filling with also a lemon curd and an almond brittle. That will give it a little bit of crunch. I would also like to make a caramel sauce to perhaps use as a drip. This will be a round 3-layered cake. And then I have a couple of ideas for some caramel sugar molds that I want to try. So there are a lot of components to this cake, and I've kind of let the day get away from me, so I'm not going to get it all done today, but I will get the cake baked and maybe get that first icing done so I can start icing the cake. We'll see how much I can get done today. So as I mentioned, I'm starting with a lemon cake, and I'm using a recipe called Lemon Cake Recipe from Sugar Spun Run. And I've used several recipes from her website before, and in fact I've made this particular cake before and it was delicious. So that's the one I'm making. I've already got my oven preheating to 350 degrees, and for this recipe it calls for 2 8-inch layers. I want to make it 3, so I'm going to do 1.5 times the recipe. And when I did it before, I didn't really change it much. I might add a little bit more lemon zest than she calls for, just because I think lemon zest is an amazing flavor. So I'm going to line my 3 8-inch pans with 8-inch parchment rounds, and I'll spray them with avocado oil. Now place the parchment rounds. I'll give them a little bit more spray, especially around the sides, and then set them over to the side out of the way. For 2 layers, the recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of lemon zest, which is approximately the zest from 3 lemons. I am doing 1.5, so that would be 4.5. I actually have 5 lemons. In fact, I'll probably do the zest of 6 lemons. I'm on lemon number 6. And she reminds me not to zest into the white because the white part of the pith is bitter. So we just want that very thin yellow peel off the very outer edge. Okay, so that's the lemon zest. Now I need to juice some of these lemons and add it to milk. Since I'm doing 1.5 times the recipe, it's great that she has these volumes in milliliters, and I can measure with milliliters. It's a little bit easier to multiply those times 1.5 than it is cups or quarter cups or whatever. So I need 240 milliliters of milk and 120 milliliters of lemon juice. It's supposed to be whole milk, which I don't have, so I'm going to blend a bit of the 2% milk I have with some heavy cream, just to give it a little bit more fat. So I'm going to use 200 milliliters of 2% milk. I'm going to squeeze the lemon juice into this small bowl and then into the milk. I'm adding 120 milliliters of lemon juice to the milk. Whisk the milk and lemon juice. Now we can start mixing the ingredients in the stand mixer. Start with 3/4 cup of avocado oil. You can use canola or vegetable oil or whatever you like. 6 tablespoons or 85 grams of softened salted butter. 525 grams of white granulated sugar. The zest of 6 lemons are going in now. And 3 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Now it's time to blend that together. Scrape down the sides and the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to weigh out the dry ingredients, and the recipe calls for cake flour, which I have. And if you don't have cake flour, you can just use all-purpose flour. Cake flour just has a little bit less protein, but all-purpose flour has pretty low protein as well. Okay, so at 1.5 times the recipe, I need 495 grams of cake flour. 1.5 tablespoons of baking powder. And I need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Since I used 6 tablespoons of salted butter, which has a little less than 1/4 teaspoon, I'll do 1 and a little less than half. 1 and about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Whisk together the dry ingredients. Okay, to the lemon zest mixture with the oil and the sugar and the butter, I'm going to alternate adding the flour mixture and the milk and lemon juice mixture until everything is wet. We don't want to overmix because that will develop gluten. It actually says to do that by hand, but I guess it might develop a little bit of gluten by using the blade, but I've got it mostly mixed with the paddle attachment, and I'll finish blending it by hand. Now the only ingredient I have left is the egg whites, and I have to whip those up separately and then fold them in. That's supposed to make the cake much fluffier, and I'll do that rather quickly because you're not supposed to let the cake mix sit, or it could develop gluten just by sitting. To get the egg whites to whip up, you have to make sure that you have a nice clean bowl and a nice clean whisk attachment, and if you have any concerns about whether it's clean, you can just wipe everything with a bit of vinegar, but I know these are very clean. So the egg whites go in the mixing bowl, and I'm going to reserve the egg yolks for the lemon curd. Okay, that's 9 egg whites, and I'll mix that up. We need stiff peaks, so I'll mix that on high. It'll take a few minutes. That is soft peaks, so a little bit longer. And that is stiff peaks. So it makes a peak and doesn't fall down. Stiff peaks. Okay, so now fold the egg whites into the batter. So I'm going to do about half. Folding means that I use the edge of the spatula and then scoop some of the batter around, and then the edge and scoop. The edge always cuts through the egg whites. It's supposed to keep the air from coming out. My bowl is almost too small, but I think I can make it work. I always feel like I'm never sure when to stop, because they say you want to make sure you get all the egg whites in, but you get them all in, is there still air? I'm not sure. Okay, well, now I need to divide this among my 3 pans, and I know how much my bowl weighs, so I'll put equal weights in each pan. 2690 grams minus the weight of my bowl, which is 782. That leaves 1908. That I divide by 3. So each pan will get 636 grams of batter. So the oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and these 3 cakes will go in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. I will test them with a toothpick after about 25 minutes, and if it comes out almost clean, I'll know they're done. Okay, while the cake is baking, I'll make a couple of the fillings, and I actually made the raspberry filling a couple of days ago because I didn't want my raspberries to go bad. I bought fresh raspberries, and I made the filling from Shell Sweets, which is the same one that I used for the sandwich cookies that I made several episodes back. And so I'll go ahead and show that video now. I'm washing my raspberries in the sink in a bowl. The way I like to wash them is to add some cold water until the fruit is covered, and then a bit of baking powder and vinegar. Creates a nice reaction that cleans off all the dirt, chemicals. Then I want to strain them. Rinse them a bit. And then pick out any little bits that didn't wash through. They're in pretty good shape. Sometimes it can damage a few of them, but since I am turning this into a filling, it doesn't matter if they're beautiful. And if I want to glaze some and put it on the top of the cake, there are still some nice looking ones. So I'm going to weigh this and then add the appropriate amounts of other ingredients and make my filling. I've got my saucepan on the scale, 350 grams, 105 grams of white granulated sugar, the zest of 1 lemon. That's the zest of 1 lemon. Now I'll add the juice of half a lemon and 1/8 of a cup of water. Okay, now I'm ready to put it on the stovetop. Now I'm going to bring that to a boil and then lower the heat to a medium-low and let it simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes. Starting to come to a boil. That's a good boil, so I'm going to turn it down to medium-low and let it simmer for about 13 minutes. Okay, so it's been 13 minutes. So now I'm going to strain the sauce through this strainer to get out all of the seeds. Get rid of the seeds, keep the good stuff. I'm going to use a clean spoon to scrape the juice off of the back.
Smells delicious. There's the strained juice, and now I want to thicken that up. And the recipe calls for a slurry of 3 tablespoons of cornstarch with 3 tablespoons of water. And last time, if you watched my sandwich cookie video, I added 1 sheet of gelatin, and it still wasn't very well set. So this time I'm going to skip the cornstarch and just add 3 sheets of gelatin. So I have a bowl of cold water, and these are my gelatin sheets. I'm going to add 3 sheets, so they just need to bloom in cold water, which means they'll soften up. Then I can add them back into the raspberry juice, put that back on the stove, and heat it up a bit more and bring it to a boil, then let it simmer for a few minutes, and then I'll put it in another bowl and put it in the refrigerator to set. Then it will be ready when I'm ready to make my cake. I rinsed out my saucepan to get all of the seeds out. So I'll pour the raspberry juice back into the saucepan. The gelatin sheets have bloomed. They're nice and flimsy. So I'm just going to add all of that into this raspberry sauce. I'm going to turn the stove to medium-high to get that to boil. Raspberry sauce is coming to a boil. So I'm going to turn that down to medium-low, let it simmer for, I guess, about 3 minutes, and then put it in the refrigerator.
Okay, so the raspberry filling has already cooled in the refrigerator. So next I'm going to make the lemon curd. For the lemon curd, basically I just put all of the ingredients together in a saucepan, then heat it up slowly until it becomes thick and coats the back of a spoon. Then I will strain it through a mesh strainer and put it in the refrigerator to cool off. So the lemon curd calls for 6 egg yolks, and I may as well do 1.5 of this one as well because I have 9 egg yolks. So I'm starting with 9 egg yolks. My 9 large egg yolks weigh 160 grams, 225 grams of white granulated sugar, 3/4 cup of fresh lemon juice. So I have the lemon juice that I reserved from earlier. Let's see how much I have. Almost 3/4 cup. Just add a little bit of lemon juice concentrate to bring that volume up. Then it also says 1/8 teaspoon of salt, but I will be adding 1/2 cup or 1 stick of salted butter, so that'll be plenty of salt. I'm going to whisk that with my silicone whisk so I don't hurt my pan. With that mixed, now I need the zest of 2 lemons. And finally, 1/2 cup of butter. This doesn't have to be softened because it's going right into the saucepan and going on the stove. But it does suggest that you cut it into 8 pieces. Okay, so I'm going to put that on the stovetop and bring it to a boil, then let it simmer until it gets thick. And it also says to use an instant read thermometer to make sure it reaches at least 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, my lemon curd is finished getting thick, and I realized when I took my saucepan over to the stove, remember I was making 1.5 times the recipe? Well, I forgot to add the extra 1/2 of lemon zest and butter. So I zested 1 more lemon and put another 1/2 stick of butter. So another 1/4 cup of butter in, and heated it until it coated the back of a spoon. and the instant read thermometer read actually 185, so it got plenty hot. Now I just need to strain it through a fine mesh sieve into a heat-proof bowl where it can cool. I wasn't sure what I'd be straining out, but it is like random bits of lemon and probably some bits of egg that cooked, so we don't want that. Okay, I want to put a piece of plastic wrap down on the lemon curd so that it won't develop a skin. Now I'll put that in the refrigerator to cool off. While I was making the lemon curd, the timer for the cakes went off, and 2 of them took about 28 minutes, and the third one took about 30 minutes. I had to move that third one. I took 2 of them out, had to move that third one to the center of the oven. I think one little corner of my oven is not as hot as the rest, so that's just what you do. So they are cooling on the racks, and will be ready soon. The last thing I want to make today is the almond brittle, and I have a recipe from Dessert for Two that says it's super easy. I've never made almond brittle before, and I'm not going to make it in a saucepan. It's actually going to be heated up in the microwave, so we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it works. I'm also going to double this recipe, so it says to have everything ready. So I have all my ingredients. I just needed piece of parchment paper to go in a baking sheet. So I'm doubling the recipe. So I'm going to start with half a cup of light corn syrup, 1 cup of white granulated sugar. Stir that up. It says to put this in the microwave for 3 minutes on high. So after 3 minutes, it's bubbling quite nicely. So I'll add 1 cup of almonds and 1 teaspoon of salt and stir. Now it says to put it back in the microwave for another 2.5 minutes. It says watch it and make sure it doesn't burn. Can't see inside the microwave. What the heck does that mean? I guess I'll let it go for 2 minutes and see. It's pretty cool. So I put it in for 1 minute and 15, looked at it, it wasn't burned. I put it in for the full 2, looked fine. So I put it in for the last 30 seconds and still looks fine. So I need to add the 1 teaspoon of butter and 1 teaspoon of vanilla, but at that temperature, I know how vanilla can survive. Maybe that just adds color. Now I'm supposed to stir that. Microwave for another 30 seconds. It's getting pretty sticky. $280. So that should be good. Okay, the final ingredient is 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And that's really supposed to make it bubble up because that helps keep the candy from being too hard to bite. It's supposed to help it be more crumbly. So I'm gonna see how this goes. One teaspoon of baking soda. Well, that didn't really bubble up. Okay, well, it did get foamy. Just thought it was going to be more stunning, more surprising. Okay, now pour it out onto baking pan. It definitely is more foamy. that should cool pretty quickly. It says about 30 minutes before you can start breaking apart the pieces. I will finish this cake tomorrow. I put the 3 cake layers in the refrigerator last night, and they are still cold. The lemon curd is in the refrigerator and the raspberry filling. So I also made the almond brittle. You'll recall I made this in the microwave and then poured it out, and it tastes delicious. So talk about an easy way to make brittle. It works. It doesn't stick to your teeth. It's really good. That'll be fun to crush up and use inside my cake to add a crunchy element. So the last few things that I need to make, number 1 is the caramel flavored icing. And basically I'll put several of the ingredients together in my pan, heat it up for a few minutes, and then let it cool down. Then I'll add powdered sugar and vanilla, and I'll have frosting. It'll be caramel flavored frosting. Now this recipe for caramel icing comes from Sugar Spun Run, and it's from her caramel cake recipe. She made a caramel flavored cake and then put the caramel frosting on top. I obviously have a lemon flavored cake, so my caramel frosting will go on the top of that. So I'm just making the caramel frosting from that recipe. So this recipe starts with 400 grams of brown sugar, and this one doesn't say light or dark, but again, I use dark brown sugar. So I'm going to measure 400 grams into my saucepan. 400 grams is 2 cups firmly packed. Now 1 cup of unsalted butter, it says, but I use salted. We can use this right out of the refrigerator because it's going into a saucepan, but I will cut it up into some smaller pieces. 1 cup of butter is 2 sticks or 225 grams. The recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, but since I used salted butter, I'm not going to add any extra. But I need a 1/3 of a cup of whole milk and a 1/3 of a cup of heavy cream. I only have 2% milk, but that'll be fine. Maybe I'll use a tiny bit extra of the heavy cream. 2/3 cup of milk, half heavy cream, half whole milk. So I'll put this on the stove top, bring it to a boil, then cook it for an additional 5 minutes, and then take it off. I don't need to bring it to a particular temperature. I just need to simmer it until it has simmered for 5 minutes, and then it needs to cool off. This is because it's going to be a frosting, not a caramel. Okay, so my caramel is ready, and I'm just going to pour it in this bowl of my stand mixer, and then it just needs to cool for 5 minutes before I add the powdered sugar and vanilla. It's been 8 or 9 minutes actually, and so now I'm going to add the powdered sugar. I need 250 grams, and it doesn't say that I need to sift it, but I'm going to go ahead and sift it. 250 grams of powdered sugar. Okay, I'm going to mix this with the paddle attachment until it's pretty much combined. It did say to go ahead and add the vanilla, but I'm going to wait till it's cooled down a little bit more and then add the vanilla, just to make sure I don't lose any vanilla flavor. So I'm going to mix this. Now to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm going to add 2. Now I'm going to blend it. Ouch. I'm going to blend it until it's cool, so that might take several minutes. While this is mixing and cooling off, I'm going to go ahead and make caramel, and this will be my 3rd version of caramel for the challenge. The first was the almond brittle, the second one is the caramel frosting, and my 3rd will be traditional caramel, and I'm going to try and make it into a few different shapes. So I'm using the same recipe that I used for the Stroop waffles. If you want to watch me make it, please watch it on the Stroop waffle video. And I'm using the homemade caramel recipe from Sarah's Day Off. It starts with granulated white sugar and makes a really great caramel. So while this is cooling, I'm going to do that. Okay, so I made my caramel on the stovetop and put it in this large bowl. I put it in the refrigerator so it can cool down. So I'm gonna, while that's cooling down, I'll start working on some other things. My caramel frosting is also pretty cool, and it lost a lot of its moisture while it was cooling off. We'll see how it spreads on the cake, and if it doesn't spread well, I might just add a little bit of milk to thin it out a bit. The caramel, I was hoping it would be thick enough that I might be able to make some sugar molds. Seems pretty thin right now, so maybe if it thickens up, I can try to do that. But I thought while I'm waiting for that to cool, I would try to do some sugar work with isomalt. So isomalt is an artificial sugar product that you can make all sorts of sugar art with. I have never done any sugar art at all, but I thought I would give it a try. You can make something like isomalt from scratch with sugar, but apparently it can burn easily. I don't know, maybe someday I'll try it, but isomalt won't burn. I just need to heat it in the saucepan with a little bit of water. I'll use 1 cup of isomalt and 1/4 cup of water. Let that heat up to about 300 or 320 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the hard crack stage for candy. So that should make a really hard isomalt. And I want to try a couple of things. I have a silicone dome mold. I want to try to make some domes with it. I also thought, I have no idea if this will work, but I thought I might try to make a lemon shape. Since the cake is lemon flavored, I thought if I could make 2 halves, I'll cut this in half. If I can make 2 halves of the lemon, maybe I could stick them together. The isomalt I can color any color I want, so I thought I would try some of it in yellow. So I will try to do that. And then I also have some cookie cutters that you can pour isomalt. I'm not sure if this will work because I think it has to be pretty flat to the surface. So I'm just going to try a couple things and see how things work. So I will be back with you after my isomalt is hot. Okay, so I have a yellow isomalt. I heated the isomalt to 300 degrees, and it was starting to turn a little brown, so I was worried that it was going to be too overdone. And then I poured some into this hot pan that I added some yellow gel food coloring. It thickened up pretty quickly, even though I heated the pan first. So I'm just going to try to cover this lemon, see what happens. Might work. Maybe I should have put this on a stand, but we'll see. You can probably cut off the parts that have gone beyond. It's just not flowing as quickly as I thought it would. It's kind of, I don't know. I've seen decorations like this where they've done this on purpose. I'm trying to make some lines. That's what I want to do. Just really cooled off very quickly. You're supposed to not add the color until it gets to 280 degrees, but it must have been a lot less than that. I still have more that is definitely still liquidy, so I wanted to try a different color. I also thought it would be fun to put a few sprinkles down and then put the isomalt over the top. Let's see how that works. I've got red and blue and yellow sprinkles. See what happens. There's a lot of fancy ways to use isomalt. I know one of them that people do with sugar is to take a fork or a whisk and go back and forth like that to make, sorry about the dogs, to make sort of lacy strands, and then before they get too cool, make shapes. I'm going to try adding some red food coloring, gel coloring, just to make something interesting. Gotta work fast because it's quickly becoming sticky. Okay, I'll just have to go with what I have. Did make a nice little nest. First try, I'm okay with it. While the isomalt things that I made set up, I'm going to go ahead and start building the cake. So this is my turntable to help me decorate, but since I want to take this to work tomorrow, I'm going to put the cake on top of this so that I can then carry this into work. So the marble display board won't move around when I'm trying to ice it. I'm just using a couple pieces of tape to hold it down. Now it'll stay still while I ice it. I have my 3 cake layers, my caramel frosting, I have the raspberry filling that I made the other day, and different from the filling I made when I made the sandwich cookies, rather than using cornstarch, I used gelatin sheets, and it actually probably set up a little too thick. It's not like Jell-O necessarily, but it is a little bit thick. So I'm gonna mix it with a mixer and see if it softens up a little bit. If the cake is not kept in the refrigerator, it will probably be a really good consistency, but we'll see. I have left over from the sandwich cookies, I have some of that raspberry filling as well, and it's much thinner. It's too thin for a cake filling. So I could blend a bit of this together to make a good filling for this cake. Let me taste it. It's so good. Making fresh fillings from fresh fruits is just amazing. I also have the lemon curd and the almond brittle. So the idea is to have 3 cake layers with the frosting will be the caramel, and between the layers we'll have some lemon curd, some raspberry filling, and to add a little crunch, I'll break up some of the almond brittle into small enough bits that it won't be like biting into a big chunk, but having just a little bit of crunch. So because it's caramelized or candied or made into brittle, it won't soften up from being next to the other fillings. I just picked up this isomalt butterfly. Darn, maybe I should have put something on there, but it cracked when I was trying to take it out, so that one won't work. I put the same amount of batter into each one of these pans in hopes that I wouldn't have to cut too much off to make them even. This one looks the flattest. I might need to cut the other ones to make them super flat, but I'm gonna go ahead and make that the first one. That's a bit disturbing. The oil, the butter, has started to separate out of the frosting. Is that going to happen when I put it on the cake? Maybe it needs to go right into the refrigerator. All right, I'm going to blend that to get that butter re-entrained. It does go back in pretty easily, but it's not a very smooth frosting. I definitely think it needs some milk. So I'm going to add some heavy cream. I think it's just not going to be a really smooth frosting. That's okay. I added about 2 tablespoons. Okay, in the middle of my display board, I'm going to spread a little bit of that caramel frosting just so that layer won't shift around. It should be fine, but we'll see. Okay, that's pretty well centered. So now I need to put some of the frosting. I want to put just a ring of the frosting around the edge to be a barrier. And I'm going to use one of my fabric plastic bags, I don't know what these are made of, to do that. And I'm going to put a coupler in just in case I decide I want to use a tip or something. Okay, that's my barrier. This is the lemon curd. It's amazing, tastes delicious. I'm going to use my other mixing bowl to get this raspberry filling mixed up. It did break it up a bit, but I definitely think it needs a bit of the looser or more liquidy raspberry filling. So I guess the lesson is that 3 sheets of gelatin is too much, maybe 2 or 1.5 next time. Okay, so I went ahead and just added all of the looser filling into this one, so a blend of both. Now I'm going to add some lemon curd to a pastry bag and put the raspberry filling in a pastry bag. Then I can easily spread it across the cake. So I'm going to add a ring of the raspberry filling. And a ring of the lemon curd. Finish off with a bit of the caramel frosting, and then I'm going to put some crumbles of the brittle in here. So I want those to be small enough pieces that when you cut into it, you don't have some big chunk, and also when you're eating it. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good, small pieces. I know when I watch these baking shows, I feel like when someone does put a brittle in the cake like this, people are always saying, you need more of it, you need more. So I'm going to add plenty. I feel like it's slightly high in the middle, so I'm just cutting off a little bit of the middle. Not too much. Okay, so I'm going to do the same pattern with the layers. So this third layer is the one that I was most concerned about not being flat. So I'm going to use my cake leveler to make it as flat as I can. Okay. Okay, that should make some nice straight edges. Now, the concern is, number one, if I have enough frosting, and number two, I need to put a thin layer on and freeze it, and then bring it out to do the frosting, because that frosting is thick and it will do best if it's frozen. When I use buttercream, what I typically do is mix a little bit of the buttercream with a lot of water, and put a nice thin coat on. I don't think I have enough of that frosting, so I'm going to use some of the lemon curd. It's nice and thin. It should make a nice thin coating around the whole cake. So we'll see. Yeah, just treat it kind of like a frosting. Okay, now I need to get that right in the freezer. I'm just about ready to go get the cake out of the freezer, but I have to thin this caramel frosting some more. There's no way it's going to spread. So I'm going to mix it and add some more cream. In fact, I think I'll add milk because it's thin. Okay, I didn't have to add too much. It's probably just about a tablespoon or two. So looks thin enough now. Also, I had originally made the caramel so that I could put it on the top of the cake, kind of like a drip, so that it would drip down the sides. I was afraid it was not going to thicken up, but it has thickened up, so I think I'll try that. So here's the cake. Pretty nice and straight. Still not a lot of frosting, but hopefully I can get it all around the cake. If I'm going to put caramel on the top, I don't need there to be a lot of frosting on the top, so I'll try to put most of it around the sides. There's a few lumps in the frosting because I think a few of the chunks didn't get mixed in with the milk very well. Oh well. Okay, I think that's about as neat and straight as I can get it. If I'm going to try to pour that caramel on, I'm going to want some pretty sharp edges here. I'm a little afraid to do it because if it messes up, I don't know how to fix it. So, but I won't know until I try, right? Okay, here goes. Caramel. Well, that worked a lot better than I thought it would. As long as it doesn't keep sliding down. Okay, I put that in the refrigerator so the caramel would stop dripping. Looks pretty good. All I have to do now is put my few sugar pieces on. They're not really that amazing, so I'm not sure if I even want to put them on. I have one, kind of looks like a lemon. I just do that right in the middle. Well, hopefully I'll have another opportunity to try doing sugar work because I didn't really succeed much this time. I made a couple of things, but leaves a lot to be desired. The caramel's good though, and the cake's gonna taste amazing. So I decided to chop up some of the almond brittle in my little nut food processor, and I'm just gonna use this to cover the cake, top of the cake a little bit. Hopefully that will cover up some of the little chunks that you see in there. And other than that, I'll put my little lemon centerpiece on and I'm going to call it good. Who knows? I'll put this in the refrigerator. Maybe by tomorrow morning, it'll be all over the place. But for now, it's looking okay. I was thinking it's kind of like a lava flow where it just keeps flowing just very slowly. But, well, this is it. This is my caramel cake. And this is the end of caramel week. So I learned a lot, and I've definitely learned how to make caramel. I've learned how to make a mess. I have a lot of dishes to clean up. But next week, I think, is pudding week. And so pudding for the British just means a really wet kind of cake. So that should be interesting when we start pudding week. As for now, thank you for joining me if you lasted this long to the end of the episode, and please share with your friends if you are enjoying watching me try these new things, and hopefully it will inspire some of you to give these things a try, to find out that it's not the end of the world when it doesn't turn out perfectly. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Hi. Well, I took the caramel cake to school, I work at a university, and asked people to give me anonymous comments. So I am going to read a couple of those. Cake tastes really good. Sponges are flavorful. The frosting is a little sweeter than I prefer. Still, I enjoyed it. So that's good. I thought the frosting was very sweet too, and I had hoped that the tartness of the lemon cake and curd would offset, but the curd was tangy, so I don't know. Very good. I especially love the crunch from the toffee. I did too. That almond brittle is amazing.
Fantastic. One of the best lemon cakes I have ever tasted. The frosting did not overpower the cake and worked well with the lemon curd. Well done. So there's somebody who liked that balance. Appearance 5, the sugar decoration. They were impressed with my sugar decoration, so I guess I shouldn't be too hard on myself for not being able to do too much, but hopefully I'll have another chance to do some sugar decorations and do something really cool. Creativity 5, color and shape 5, texture 5. So we are planning to make a survey that people give a rating for, and I think that person knew about that, so that's why she gave those ratings, or he. Okay, lemon cake, very good combination, could be less sweet. Almost makes my teeth hurt. Yeah, I thought it was too sweet too, so. Yeah, if I did it again, I think I would probably leave out the lemon curd. I don't know, I feel like that was tangy and somehow that didn't balance. Some people thought it did and thought it was great, but the raspberry filling was definitely good with it. So, okay, there's my reviews. I'll try to do reviews for each one of my bakes. Sometimes it works out that I'll take it in and sometimes it won't. So we'll see.